Okay, we're going to immediately move on with step 4. And in step 4, we're going to focus on formulating a clear plan. And this may sound like it isn't about motivation, but actually research has shown very clearly that this is one of the most important parts of motivation. Because the more question marks there are on your path, the more likely it is that you get stuck. So it's essentially what I told you earlier about. One of the biggest enemies of action is thinking, and especially overthinking. So what I recommend you do is, as much as possible, you try to separate between thinking and acting, which means that you have a planning phase first, and then later when you're executing that plan, you'll focus purely on execution and try to avoid thinking too much and especially changing your plan. You just want to do what your plan says. And I want to show you now what exactly you need to do to make sure that your plan is effective. So what does an effective plan look like? And the good news is that it really doesn't have to be complicated. Actually, one sentence can already be enough. One sentence can already be a terrific plan. And the key for making a plan effective is that it gets two key components right, which are the trigger and the action. An effective plan needs to have a very clear trigger and a very clear action. Here's a little example. At 8 a.m., I'll go for a 20 minutes run. The trigger here is at 8 a.m. and the action is I'll go for a 20 minutes run. And notice that it's just one sentence, but it's very, very clear. At 8 a.m., you go out, you run for 20 minutes, and you're done. So let's zoom into these two aspects. Let's zoom into the trigger and the action and see what those two need to look like to create an effective plan. Here's some examples of some poorly formulated triggers and some better formulated triggers. So, for example, a not so well formulated trigger would be during lunchtime. When is during lunchtime? Is that at 12? Is that at 1? Is that at 2? When exactly is during lunchtime? If you don't specify that clearly, then what will happen is that during lunchtime, you won't immediately get active, but you first ask yourself, is this the right moment to do it? Or should I do it 20 minutes later? And that's what you want to avoid. So a better trigger would be at 1 p.m. And here's another example of a not so well formulated trigger. After work. But when is after work? Is that right after work? Or is that an hour after work? So you want to pick something here, such as, for example, right after work. And another example of a not so well formulated trigger would be at home. What you probably mean if you say at home is as soon as I'm home. And if that's what you mean, then say that. Because when exactly is at home? Is that right after you arrived at home? Or is that an hour later? And you want to make that clear. Okay, here's one more example, and this one is a little bit more tricky. So this is a not so well formulated trigger, which is after I am done. And there are two main problems here. The first problem is that after isn't very clear. Is that right after you're done? Or is that an hour after you're done? And again, you want to pick something here, such as, for example, as soon as I am done. The second problem here is what happens if whatever you need to do first takes longer than you think? And what if once you're done, you don't have the time anymore or you don't have the energy anymore to do what you were planning to do? For example, if you want to go to the gym after work. What if your work takes so long that you don't have the time or energy anymore to go to the gym? And a good way to prevent that this happens is that you set yourself a deadline. You say, as soon as I'm done, and for example, no later than 6 p.m. And the key here is to really take that serious and prioritize here. So one way to think about it is, let's say you would have to pick up your son from school. If that has to happen at 6 p.m., then it doesn't really matter what happens at work. You know that at 6 p.m. you just need to go. And the key here is to treat your plan in the same way. If you want to go to the gym to help yourself lose weight, then you will say that, okay, until 6 p.m. my work has priority, but after 6 p.m. the gym has priority. So you really want to stick to your deadline here. I know that it can seem a little bit silly to focus so much on these little details, but research has really clearly shown that these are the details that matter. If you really specify the trigger well, then you will find it a lot easier to get active when the time comes. So it's really worth spending a little bit of time here to get that trigger as clear as possible. Okay, let's zoom into the action part of the plan. Again, here's some examples of actions that are not so well formulated and actions that are better formulated. So here's an example of a not so well formulated action. Exercise. What is exercise? Is that running or is that lifting weights? What exercise do you want to do? If you don't specify that, then what's likely going to happen is that at the moment you actually should get active, you wonder, hey, what am I actually going to do? And that's what we want to prevent. We want to separate between thinking and acting so that once you're done with thinking, you can focus on acting. So a better formulated action here would be, I go for a 20 minutes run. Here's another example. I eat something healthy. But what is something healthy? It's not very clear here. So a better example would be, I eat a Pegasus filet with broccoli, if you like that. I happen to like that. Okay, another example, not so well formulated, would be, I work on my business, but what exactly are you going to do? So a better example would be, I create a full landing page. And another example of a not so well formulated goal would be, I study. A better example would be, I read 30 pages of some book. So as you can see, a plan is something that can be really, really simple, just one simple sentence. And you just want to make sure that you get the two key aspects of the plan right, which is making the trigger clear and making the action clear. And if you get that right, then you will find that it gets a lot easier to consistently get active. Okay, but there's more we can do to make the plan even more effective, and that is to prepare. And the reason why we want to prepare is because our mind has this inertia, you could say. It is relatively difficult for our mind to go from a state of inaction to a state of action. And what we want to do is we want to make that transition as easy as possible. So essentially, we want to make it as easy as possible to get started. So what do I mean by that? Here's an example. Let's say you want to study tomorrow, or you want to work on your business. And if your work desk looks like this, then you will probably have to spend the first 10 minutes just cleaning up your desk before you can actually get started. And this is one of these subtle motivation killers. Just because of this, it may happen that you decide in the end to not do it. So a very simple way to dramatically increase the likelihood that you actually follow through with your plan is to clean up your desk the day before so that once you get started, you can immediately actually get started. Here's another example, and this actually made a huge difference for me. I actually applied that in my own life. Almost a year ago, I decided that I want to go to the gym much more consistently than I was going before. I wanted to go 5 times per week in the morning before work. The problem is that I'm really not a morning person, so getting up in the morning 5 times a week earlier than I normally do is not easy for me. And here's one thing I did that made a huge difference for me. I started to pack my gym bag the evening before I went to the gym. And I also prepared my breakfast the evening before I went to the gym. And I even put the clothes out that I would wear for the gym. So all I really had to do in the morning was get up, put on my clothes, grab my sandwich from the fridge, so my breakfast, and then grab my gym bag and go to the gym. Which really just takes me 5 minutes and makes it so much easier to get started in the morning. And just because of this change, I got so much more consistent at going to the gym. And by now I've managed to do it consistently for about 8 months. Okay, here's one more example. Suppose that you're on a diet because you want to lose weight. Then you want to make sure that your flat is really full of healthy things to eat. And you want to make sure that if you get hungry at some point, you know where you can grab a healthy snack that you can eat to kill your hunger. Because if you don't have that and you're already hungry and now you need to think of something to eat and you don't know what, then it's likely that you resort to something that is not so healthy and actually compromises your diet. So it's as the famous saying goes, failing to prepare is preparing to fail. So make sure that you prepare well and you will find that it gets a lot easier to stay motivated and to make consistent progress towards your goal. Okay, and at this point it's time for an assignment again. And the assignment is simply to pick one or more activities that are necessary to reach your goal. So that can be exercising to lose weight, or working on your business, or studying. Just pick one activity or more if you like, and formulate a clear plan for those activities. And of course, what you want to focus on there is making clear when and where exactly you will do it, so the trigger, and also what exactly you're gonna do, so the action. Okay, and then the last part of the assignment is to ask yourself in just 1 or 2 minutes, how can you prepare for this? How can you make it easier for yourself to start? Alright, you will find the whole assignment explained again after this lecture. So now it's time for you to get active and do the assignment. And then after that, I see you again in the next lecture.